If you like scouting deer online and get really excited when you find new spots, pumped up when you see those trails on the internet, this video is for you. I'm going to teach you how I swamp hunt and how I cyber scout swamps. Check it out, you don't want to miss this one. But first, please consider subscribing to the Relentless Sportsman channel. Make sure you hit that bell icon too so you can get notified of all upcoming videos and anything else posted here on the Relentless Sportsman channel. There are lots of great videos helping you be more successful out on the water and in the woods hunting and fishing. Now, back to the video. So what you're looking at right here is a swamp that I decided to scout. So as I look around here on this map, there's a lot of key features I want to bring out. And if you're new to this swamp or marsh, you'll find that maybe it's not so obvious to you, but after looking at a couple of different maps, some deer sign is quite obvious to you, and the first thing I want to point out is the trails. Deer trails in swamps and marshes are relatively easy to find, sometimes in fields as well. Wherever there's short vegetation, you can see where deer consistently travel from one point to the next for whatever reason, bedding, or it even could be for food. After I discover that there are massive trails leading from one island to the next or to the mainland, I have to ask myself why. So is it a food source on the island? Is it protection? Is it good spots for doe bedding so that during the rut the bucks are cruising these islands? And usually the answer is kind of a combination. In most islands you're going to find that it's a good food source, oaks, which leads to acorn, whether from white oaks or red oaks or even pin oaks, but sometimes they go there for isolation. There's a lot of reasons why a deer might want to be on this island out here simply for protection. It makes a lot of sense. Coyotes don't like to get wet. People don't like to get wet and go through water if they can help it. And the deer figure that out. They know this. It's instinctual. So they're going to spend a lot of time on these islands just for protection. And then once the sun starts to set, they'll make their way off the island to the local food source. Now, if there's a strong food source on the island, they might stay there, like acorns. But in some islands, they don't have that, and they do have to leave to get a better diet. You can see a trail here. You can see a very large one here. I think that's actually probably from like a snowmobile or something. But one thing to note from trails, everybody, is that just because you see a lot of trails does not mean that they're constantly using these trails still. There's been countless occasions where I've gone to swamps and marshes and I've seen that trails are not even there anymore. If the map is 3, 4, 5 years old and hasn't been updated, you might notice that there are several deer trails on there, but due to certain circumstances with a change in population or a food shift or whatever, deer just simply are not using those trails anymore. So I get really excited when I find these trails, but I also have to keep in mind that I don't want to get too excited because I get a little disappointed if I go there. Like this one, for example, you can see right here that this is heavily used, but if I go there and I see that there's just a few deer tracks, a lot of small fawn tracks, and maybe just 1 or 2 trails rather than several trails, that does happen. It is common. It is a little bit misleading looking at these trails, but on the other hand, it also tells you that at some point deer were there and there was a reason they were there, so it's definitely worth checking out. As you can see, I put a logo down here. That means I park here. The road comes around and there's a small parking spot right there. I'm going to look at access from other hunters. I'm going to look at how big the entire parcel is. Is it a 40-acre parcel? Area in public hunting where it could possibly be 20, 30,000 acres. I call this a swamp because it's got bog-like terrain, and I call a marsh when I see cattails. Kind of the same if you think about it. It's wet ground with isolated islands that deer go from one point to the next. So I do like to park in designated parking spots and at least walk to another spot to access the property. But as you can see down here, it's not terribly far to walk here to this island. So what I'll do is I'll mark the parking spot first. Then what I do is I like to use the line distance tool, kind of have an idea of where I would like to walk around and do some scouting once I get there. So I'm setting this up right now online so that when I get there I have a solid plan and I'm not wasting my time. So when I scout this property, I want my vehicle to the closest location I can to where I begin my scouting. If I only have 3 hours to scout this area, I need to make the most of my time, and you can easily spend all day scouting an area this big. But let's just pretend there's a south wind, meaning the south wind, this being south, this being north up here, the wind is blowing in this direction. And when I use things for deer hunting in particular, I always use the color brown. When I walk, I like to use this. It's a little dotted line here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to send this over like that so you can see it. I'm going to start here. Let's say I want to investigate this island right here because I believe that there could be possible bedding and big buck sign on the ends of these islands as they transport from one area to the next. So I'm going to park here. I'm going to look to see how much deer sign there is, as you can see these tracks there. So I will stop right here. I'm going to just pretend that, hey, you know, there's probably good deer movement right there, but what I'm really interested in is deer moving from the mainland, because they're probably going back and forth from a food source. That's just what has taught me in the past. So I'm just going to save that for the sake of this, and that's going to be my first point of attack here. That's my first game plan. So when I'm there, I'm going to start thinking about looking for deer sign here. It can be tracks, it can be scat, it can be a food source, it could be anything. So then I'm going to put a possible deer stand right here. But the problem is, if this is a south wind and the wind is blowing this way and the deer are traveling this way, I'm going to get winded. So this is actually not a good spot for a deer stand. Potentially in a different wind setup, but if the wind's blowing from the south, you do not want to put a deer stand on this side of this island if you're hoping to shoot deer that could potentially walk across the swamp in this direction. So what I'm going to do now is continue that line. I want to target this other area, and the reason why I'm staying on the edge of the island is to keep my scent blowing away from it, rather than putting scent all throughout this middle part of the island. I'm actually going to put it around, and I'm going to see how much deer activity is right here. But my main focus is always the points and tips of the islands, because that's usually where deer will enter an island for the most part. They're going to bed out there, and then they'll sneak on the island for a food source, or a cruising buck during the rut or whatever. So I'm going to stop here. Let's say I didn't see a lot of sign here, and I'm just going to continue with keeping a line. So do that again. I'm going to continue down here, just keep going around. I'm going to stop there. So I'm going to go this way on a south wind just to hunt this, and I'm going to really want to set up over here somewhere. Now, I can tell you that this area, there's not a lot of oaks in this area. As a matter of fact, there's almost none. And this is mostly pine trees and aspen, or we say in Wisconsin it's popple. So there's a really good chance this is way too thick to sit in, especially up in the tree in a canopy. So what I'm going to do is probably have to be right on the tip here and be really careful setting up in my deer stand, which is a saddle, which helps because I can stay behind the tree. But if you're in a deer stand and as a mobile hunter, you'll probably find that it's a little bit difficult to set up here, especially with bucks cruising and bedding out here in the marshes where you can find exposed trees where they might have their beds at. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a stand right here, and with this icon, I'm going to make sure it's brown, slide it down, and that's my first potential setup if I were to go in and hunt. Now, if I was not interested in hunting this island, which to be honest with you, I probably would not because it's the easiest access for hunters, I would probably choose one of these at least. This one at the bare minimum. Going out here would probably be the best option because that's the farthest away from the mainland and the hardest one to get to, in my opinion. Out here would be difficult to get to, but if somebody was walking on this point out here, this is simply just a point connected to the mainland. This is not an island. If they walk down here and up to this island, that would be fairly simple to attain access there. It's really thick in here, but maybe they could come out here. This looks like potential bedding. In the middle, this looks like potential bedding. A lot of these trees right here, I can tell you right now, are underneath the water, and bucks will not bed on those. They need to be a little bit above them and have their root systems a little higher, but these trees did not. These trees did not, and none of these did as well. So if bucks are going to bed out in the middle on a tree, you're probably going to need to look for trees that are, just 6 inches a foot above the water. That's all they need, and they're probably going to be out on those trees so that they can see everywhere. I do have a good example of that. I'll show you right now. This is the spot where you're going to find a buck bed. They can go south. They can go west, which is the food source over to the west. They can go further right, which is more back into a swamp or a marsh. They can go north, which is back into a swamp or a marsh and a bedding area. So when they sense danger from any direction, they're going to go the opposite way. So if there's someone walking this way, the buck's going to take this trail and hightail it out of there. They have this, kind of all figured out, just programmed in their DNA. If somebody's walking down this way and the buck's sitting here, it's going to go this way. And so you want to find lone trees like this or bushes or something that's just above the water to offer visual cover, but also where it has these multiple trails leading, and there's a good chance that that buck is using all those trails for different purposes, usually as escape routes, but also for food access. I would actually have another trail leading off of this one. I would not want to cross this area, especially on a south wind. If I see a lot of heavy deer activity right here, I'm going to think, hey, I cannot go down this far on this point of the island and cross where they do, or even go further south, because all that scent I'm leaving in that swamp on that forage is going to blow to where the deer are walking to and from, or even bedded. So what I would do in this situation is I would go back to my line tool, select brown and this type of line, and then from here I would skip and go straight across to this island, and I would set up a stand in this area right here, most likely. So then what I would do there is I would save that. If you have a lot of south wind in your area, which we have lately, it's a good idea to kind of prepare for that, or to prepare for any wind for that matter. So then I put a stand there, tree stand, brown, and I use different colors for all my animals. Like ducks I use red, and turkeys I have a color, and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I would put in that situation. But we're not done there with that island, because you can see they access here and they also access here. And I have a feeling that this is probably the best place that they would access, simply because it's the point of an island connecting to another point, and deer like points. They like edges and they like to be secluded. So here we go. We'll continue that. Here I would walk around and I would check this over here on that side. I'm still staying on the north side of this island. I'm not going to the south side of these islands, as you can see, because I do not want to get my scent there. North side of the island over here. And then I would try to do some kind of stand setup on this point if I noticed that there was some sign here, which there almost always is. You're going to see some kind of track, scat, whatever. And then I would, of course, put my deer stand there. And I say stand, but really I'm just using a saddle, but kind of the same thing. I would pick out a tree on this side, and a spot where the deer, as they approach the island, had a hard time visually seeing you. So that's how I would look at those stands like that in that situation. You can take your line distance tool, click the brown, click the style you want, and from this island you could go up here. But if I were to actually do that, I would have to kind of go back to where we started here and make a line just to that point. But I wouldn't actually even walk out this way. You could do that if you're going directly here, but if you wanted to check out this island, and that one, the best way to do this in this particular order, in my opinion, would be to go here, the first island first, and then go directly across. And you can even go out in case you're afraid of spooking deer, maybe on this end of this island, and then go straight down here. That's a very good possibility. Then once you're done there, let's just say you did this first and you want to go to this island second, because you don't want to go here, get your scent all over it, which is going to blow up in this area. So you're going to go up here, cut around, and then you're going to want to go in another direction, which would be due south into the wind to this island if you felt that was necessary. Or you can go up here, check out the tracks. If that's not good, then you can also come, save that, and then you can also come back over here and kind of do a bit of scouting on the second island. It all depends where you want to end up. In my opinion, this would be the best island. This would be another good island, and this one I would avoid this one. So it doesn't always mean that being far away from access points is where the deer are. Sometimes there's overlooked areas where the deer expect people to go, and they will be just off of it. Sometimes deer bed just off the side of parking lots because they don't expect people to hunt there. They've never had scent in there, they've never had pressure, so they do that as well. So this is kind of the route I would take if this was me. I would go in here, I would come around, and this is on a south wind. This is a scouting trip. I would come up, go around, I would scout a little bit on this island. The tips of islands will tell you a lot about the rest of the island. If you don't see sign on the tips of the islands, this is going to be a waste of time going in the middle. If they're not on the tip on these access points where you can see these tracks coming in, they're not going to be here in the middle. There's not going to be a lot of sign. It's probably not worth your time. Basically, in a nutshell, for a scouting trip. I went to this swamp. I found that I was right in a lot of areas and wrong in a lot of areas. So let's talk about that. You can clearly see the icons I put on here. I do this as I'm scouting. I put an icon for just about anything that's going to help me pattern the deer better. And so I was wrong about 3 things. You can see this map looks a lot different because of the icons from the one I just kind of showed you how I would scout this going in. This is what I actually did when I went to the swamp. So I started here, went around, this was my route. I went here, I was disappointed again, came back down, came to this point, pretty good sign there. Came back here, really disappointed here. If you look here, I mean, that thing should just be hammered with deer sign right now. I saw like a small doe track and a fawn or something. It was pretty bad. That was it. And it's all mud right here going up to the island, so that should stick. You know, you should see those pretty well. Then I came over here, up here, back down, and back to the car. The whole thing took about like 4 hours. It takes a lot longer than you'd think. Here's some things I was wrong about. Betting on points. I was expecting to see some betting on these points. especially this one. I didn't see any dogwood. I didn't see any thick brush that was above water. It was all submerged. There's a lot of thick brush, but it was all submerged. Now, bucks like to bed in that stuff, but it can't be 100% submerged. It has to be at least above the water with water around them. I was also wrong about the island food source. This is the second thing. I did not see any food source. I mean, they'll eat just about anything, but I did not see acorns out here. There was no oaks on any of these islands. I just went to these two because I was like, that's enough. I've seen enough. No acorns, obviously no oaks then, and it was pretty disappointing. I was expecting to see at least one or two, just a couple, but not even one, which really changed the way I looked at it, because that meant that if there's no oaks there, there's no hardwoods in general. What do we have? We have pine trees and aspen. Not good for hunting. Couple reasons. Pine trees is not going to let you open it up. It might be good for deer to stage out there or deer to feel sheltered, which is important too, but you're not going to have any shooting lanes. As I was walking through these two islands, there was no place to set in a tree where you could actually shoot an arrow through it. No place, unless you only want to shoot 6 feet away from your tree. It was just ridiculously thick, which again is good for bedding and stuff, and I didn't really even see a lot of evidence for that, unfortunately. But the only places I did see where you could kind of get away with it is on the tip of this island, but you have to be ready. Like, you have to be sitting in your tree, looking, staring down this way, where a buck would come up to the point, and if you're not ready with an arrow docked, and it has to be in the vertical position, you have to be staring at it. You can't look away for 10 seconds because you might miss your opportunity. And then there was some opportunity at this point of this island, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So that's where I was wrong. I thought there'd be oaks. I thought there'd be a food source, which, with oak trees being a mature hardwood tree producing oaks, that's going to open things up a little bit, but they didn't have that. And then I was wrong about beds on point. So those three things. Where I was right, I found out I was more wrong than right on this little scouting trip. I was right about points having the most sign. That's almost always going to be true. So decent sign down here. The most sign I found was on the second island down over there, and very little human activity. As a matter of fact, I only saw evidence of humans right here, which makes sense, because if you park here, this is the first island, this is the first point. This is the only other place you could put a tree stand, and I did find a ladder stand up there from somebody else that they left on there. That's about the only place. So when I first came onto this island, I was like, hey, somebody's ladder stand. I was like, that's dumb. Why would you put it there? Someone can steal it. It's so easy to get out here and whatever. But I was like, that's probably the only person that ever goes out there, for one, and for two, to drag a ladder stand through a swamp, not fun. That person just leaves it out there, and that's the only spot I could see where you could actually shoot maybe 15 yards. Everything else is like 5 or less, and that's plenty of space to shoot a deer, but boy, if you don't have your crossbow on your shoulder with a safety up by the time the deer gets on the island, you're not going to be able to shoot anything. And there's basically no activity on the tops of these islands because they have no reason to go up there. If they had mature oaks dropping acorns, they would go up here and feed. But all of the activities around the sides where they have the thickest brush, and they can walk these islands and scent check and bed, basically. And I didn't really see any beds over there either. I did see beds is in this area right here. This is a really good little bedding area right next to here and right next to the road. Nobody thinks to hunt there, nobody thinks to walk through there, so you're not going to have a lot of activity from humans. You just won't. Deer are in these overlooked areas, and to prove it, I was walking in and I kicked out a doe right here. That's what this icon is for. She was in this bed and I kicked her out, and I don't know if she went to the island here or just kind of scooted out to this point. And then on the way back, I kicked up another doe, which I'm guessing it's the same one. I don't know for sure. They were the same size. I kicked up another doe bedding here in this thick tag holders, I guess you'd call it. The most deer sign I've actually seen a deer. I saw 2 here, and I saw none out here, and I was glassing out there, and it's tough to see. Anyway, so then I made it through there, and I went to this island here, and you might be able to get away with putting a deer stand here. What I would recommend in really thick island points like that is to just sit on the ground and put some brush or cover in front of you and just watch these main trails coming out the points. And at some point, deer will come onto the island, hopefully during daylight, and that's going to be your opportunity. I saw a really good trail coming here. I saw a really good trail coming here. Like, it's used quite frequently. It's not just like, oh, a doe walked there last month and the brush kind of moved a little bit. No, like, pretty good solid trail. I saw another good solid trail right here. So if I were to hunt this, and I saw some big deer scat, some buck scat where it's like clumped together, and I saw a really big track on this island. So if I were to hunt this, like I was saying, this swamp, this is where I would go based on my scouting. Now, that was basically all I had time for. It was getting dark, I had to go back. But if I did investigate this one or even this point and this tip, I couldn't find better sign. It doesn't take much to hold a big deer. But basically this is a really nice little area to set up on if you hunt on the ground. I would not bring a saddle or a stand in there. You're going to waste your time and effort. Bring a little chair to sit on or something, or just a little pad to sit on the ground. This would be the ideal spot. This spot might work. I did see some deer sign. I saw some nice scat and a nice deer trail going around here, but that's going to be one of those things, right place, right time. I don't think it's habitual. I think deer just happen to go through there every now and then and use that as little access points to get to these other islands. But this one, I saw the most sign, and the most buck sign, I should say. I didn't see a lot of small scat. I saw big scat, I saw big track, and I see very heavily used trails coming off of this mainland over here, and then again off of this island. Well, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed that, learned something new. If I forgot something, or there's some question you have for me, leave that in the comments below and I'm happy to help you out. I'm happy to learn something new. Stick around, there's going to be a lot more videos coming up. Take care.